Europe likes to boast about its green transition, while its actual grid stability still depends on a fleet of French reactors mostly designed before many current ministers were born. On paper, Paris promises a nuclear renaissance. In reality, the clock is ticking on 40-year-old hardware, and the new reactors exist mainly in speeches. Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. France today is simultaneously the nuclear anchor of Europe and one of its biggest energy risk factors. When 60-70% of your electricity comes from nuclear, one maintenance mistake or one policy fantasy doesn't stay inside your borders. It travels through interconnectors into prices in Germany, Belgium, Italy, and indirectly into the Baltics as well. By the end of this, you'll see why the French nuclear story is no longer a comfortable guarantee, but a structural vulnerability for the whole European system. Let's start with the basic reality. France runs 56 nuclear reactors, most of them commissioned between the late 1970s and early 1990s. The average age is pushing 38-40 years. In a good year, nuclear still covers roughly 2/3 of French electricity generation and turns the country into a net exporter. In a bad year, when half the fleet is down for inspections, corrosion checks, and emergency repairs, France suddenly imports power at high prices and drags half the continent with it. Here is where the story stops making sense. The same political class that shut down the Fessenheim plant early under green pressure now talks about a nuclear renaissance, while the regulator hasn't even signed off on the new design. Officially, the plan is beautiful: 6 new EPR2 reactors, each about 1,600 megawatts, with an option to go up to 14. Replacement of old units 1 for 1. First construction start around 2027 to 2028. First power around 2035 to 2037. Serial construction to drive costs down. France remains the nuclear heart of Europe, and everybody lives happily ever after on low-carbon baseload. In real numbers, it looks very different. The previous EPR generation is the warning sign: Olkiluoto 3 in Finland, construction start 2005, commercial operation only in the 2020s, costs multiplied roughly threefold. Flamanville 3 in France, started in 2007, still crawling through final stages, more than a decade late, with the budget going from a few billion euros to well over 10. Hinkley Point C in the UK, initial cost estimates blown open, timelines sliding, EPR units turning into the most expensive megawatts in Europe before they even exist. If you remember only one thing from this video, let it be this: France wants to renew its nuclear fleet using a design family that has so far delivered delays of 10+ years and cost overruns of 200 to 300%. The answer from EDF and the government is EPR2, a simplified version of the 1,600 megawatt reactor. Same output, fewer steam generators, fewer auxiliary buildings inside the containment, a more compact layout, and in theory, cheaper construction and faster build time. The narrative is very simple. We have learned our lessons, we will build the same block many times, we will reduce unit costs, and the renaissance will pay for itself. And this is the part no politician wants to explain on TV. None of this can happen without the state nuclear regulator signing off. And the regulator is in no hurry to live inside Macron's PowerPoint. The French authority, ASN, is not a PR department. It has its own research institute, its own engineers, and only one mandate: nuclear safety. It already told EDF that the EPR2 project is globally satisfactory in concept, but that key areas are not ready for licensing: resistance to external events like earthquakes, flooding, and aircraft crashes, the management of severe accidents inside a more compact containment, and the full life cycle question of decommissioning and waste. ASN's own timeline says no full project license before the end of 2026, and that's only the first step. After that comes a second license tied to each specific site, with ground conditions, seismic risks, and local engineering factored in. So when you hear construction will begin in 2027, read it as, if everything goes perfectly in a system where almost nothing has gone perfectly for 20 years. From your country, does this look like strategy or just improvisation with a flag on top? Meanwhile, the existing fleet is not standing still in time. The weld problems you occasionally see in the news are not minor scratches on the paint. They involve pressure circuits, safety systems, and even the reactor vessel head at Flamanville, which ASN allowed to operate only on the condition that it be replaced at the first refueling outage. That is a very expensive way of saying, we are not fully happy with what you built, but we will not throw away 15 years of work in one move. This is where the spreadsheet quietly turns into social unrest. when EDF has to pour billions into prolonging the life of old reactors, billions more into finishing delayed projects, and still prepare tens of billions for new EPR2 units, someone pays. Part of it comes from the state budget, part from rising regulated tariffs, part from temporary surcharges and capacity mechanisms that end up on industrial bills and household invoices. Officially, the story is about energy transition and climate leadership. In practice, it is about who absorbs the cost of a 30-year nuclear pause and a chaotic restart. Now, let's zoom out to the players and incentives. For Paris, nuclear is not just an energy technology. It is industrial policy, export strategy, and national prestige. A France without a dominant nuclear sector becomes just another medium-sized European country with expensive electricity and no unique leverage. That is why Macron talks about renaissance regardless of whether the engineering and the financing are in place. For Brussels, French nuclear is both a problem and a lifeline. On one hand, it clashes with the ideological wing that wants everything labeled renewable and market-driven. On the other hand, without French baseload, the whole continental system becomes even more dependent on gas imports, interconnectors, and price spikes whenever the wind is not cooperating. Everyone is supposed to believe we are moving into a flexible, renewable-centric paradise. The system, however, is still built around large, stable generators, and France is the last major one inside the EU. For the US and Asian suppliers, every delay and cost overrun in French and European nuclear means more room for LNG cargoes, more long-term gas contracts, more room for their own reactor designs and fuel services. For Russia and China, it is simple. The less predictable Europe's nuclear backbone becomes, the easier it is to position their own technology as stable and their energy exports as unavoidable. If you work in energy or industry, you probably see this earlier than everyone else. When a French reactor goes offline unexpectedly or a maintenance outage runs long, spot prices jump. Large consumers hedge more. Smaller factories see their margins evaporate. Governments respond with exceptional subsidies, tax credits, or compensation schemes. Step by step, the model shifts from cheap, stable energy plus exports to expensive, unstable energy plus permanent compensation. This is where it moves from a Paris speech to your electricity bill and your rent. In the Baltics, we already pay a premium for sitting in a tightly connected but structurally fragile regional market. When French exports falter, German prices go up, Nordic hydro has to cover more gaps, and the whole system becomes more volatile. That volatility is then used to justify new cables, new market rules, new capacity payments. All of it is eventually financed by households and SMEs, not by press conferences. If you live in Germany or Poland, does this match what you see around you? Official optimism, new slogans, and in practice, more price spikes, more one-off support measures, and a very old hardware base in the background. The main thesis here is not that French nuclear fails, it is more uncomfortable. Europe has tied a large part of its energy security to a fleet of reactors that are aging together, while the replacement program is late, expensive, and constrained by a regulator that still remembers what Chernobyl and Fukushima looked like from the control room logs, not from Twitter. In that sense, Macron is not wrong to call for a nuclear comeback. He is just pretending that time, money, and engineering capacity still look like they did in the 1980s. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and try to remember, slogans don't power grids, systems do.